You know how some scientific debates seem to go on forever? Study after study piles up, but the puzzle pieces just never seem to fit? Well, what if I told you there's a super tool that can take all that messy, conflicting research and finally give us a clear answer? That's what we're diving into today.
So let's put this tool to the test with a classic corporate mystery. For decades, researchers have argued about who really runs the show at a big company. Is it the top management team, the CEO and their top execs, or is it the board of directors, the group that's supposed to be overseeing them? Seems like a straightforward question, right? But for decades, the evidence has been all over the place, just a total mess.
So here's our game plan. We're going to dive into this corporate power struggle, figure out why the old ways of looking at it just fell short, and then I'll introduce you to this super tool I mentioned. We'll set up a head-to-head horse race between competing theories, see who wins, and then talk about what this means for the future of research. Okay, so first up, the corporate power struggle. And this isn't just some academic debate, right? The link between who's really in charge and how well a company does, that's a billion-dollar question. And even though it's one of the most studied topics in business, the answer has always been surprisingly fuzzy. I mean, for years, researchers have thrown everything at this. We're talking hundreds of studies. But the results? They were totally contradictory. Some studies say a strong board is everything. Others say, no, it's all about the CEO's experience. A lot of them just found nothing. It's like having 1,000 puzzle pieces from a dozen different boxes. A huge pile of information, but absolutely zero clarity.
So what gives? Why couldn't we just sift through all those studies and find the answer? Well, it turns out the tools everyone was using had this one huge critical blind spot.
The go-to tool for a long time has been something called a meta-analysis. Think of it like being a detective who gathers all the witness statements from a crime. It statistically combines the results from all the previous studies to find an overall trend. It's fantastic for spotting a pattern, but, and this is a big but, it has one major limitation.
And here's the issue in a nutshell. A standard meta-analysis can only really check the link between two things at a time. Like, does a long-serving CEO lead to better company performance? Check. But real-world power isn't a straight line. It's this complex web of influences. And that's exactly where this tool just hits a wall. Which brings us to the really crucial question. What if it's not a direct line? What if the management team first influences the board, and then the board's actions influence company performance? That's a whole chain reaction, right? Your traditional meta-analysis, it can see the individual puzzle pieces, but it has no way to actually put the whole picture together. So, to solve a complex puzzle, you need a more advanced tool. You need a kind of scientific super sleuth that can actually see the whole conspiracy, not just the individual clues. And this is where our hero method comes in. It's called MASEM.
It's a bit of a mouthful. It stands for Meta-analytic Structural Equation Modeling. But the idea is brilliant. It's a hybrid. It takes the power of meta-analysis, gathering all the data from an entire field of research, and combines it with another powerful method called structural equation modeling. This lets it test complex, multi-step theories. We're not just looking at single links anymore, we're testing the entire story. And the way it works is actually pretty straightforward. Step 1, you lay out all the competing theories, all the different stories about how things might work. 2, you do the meta-analysis, gathering up all the data from all the previous studies. 3, you use that massive pile of data to test how well each of those stories, each theory, actually fits with reality. And finally, step 4, you announce the winner.
And when I say a massive pile of data, I am not kidding. To crack our corporate mystery, the researchers pulled together data from 208 different articles, spanning 30 years of work. The grand total, the final analysis was based on almost 500,000 observations. That gives this method an unbelievable amount of power to settle these old arguments for good. All right, so we've got our super tool, we've got our mountain of data. It is time for the main event. The researchers set up what they called a horse race to see which of 3 competing theories about corporate power would come out on top. So, let's meet our contenders.
In lane 1, we have the simplest idea, the direct effects model. This theory basically says that the management team and the board both have their own separate, direct impact on how the company does. Nice and simple, no messy interactions, just 2 independent forces at play.
Okay, in lean 2, we've got the favorite, the conventional wisdom. This is called agency theory. This is what you'd read in most textbooks. The idea is that the board of directors is firmly in charge. They monitor and direct the management team, and it's the management team's actions that then drive the company's performance. So the chain of command is clear: board, management, performance. And finally, in lane 3, we have the long shot, the controversial challenger, the rubber stamp model. This one completely flips the script. It suggests that, actually, the top management team is the one pulling the strings. They influence and shape the board, basically getting the board to approve their agenda. The board becomes, well, a rubber stamp. Here the pathway is management, board, performance.
Okay, so we have our 3 horses in the race: the simple model, the textbook model, and the controversial model. The researchers fed all that data from nearly 500,000 observations into the MASEM model to see which story best fit reality. It is time for the big reveal.
So, after all that, after analyzing data from over 200 studies, which theory of corporate power actually holds up? The simple direct model, the textbook agency theory, or the controversial rubber stamp model? Which one wins the race?
And the results are not just clear, they are stunning. Okay, look at this table. The key number here is the CFI, or Comparative Fit Index. All you need to know is that the closer to 1.0, the better the theory fits the data. The direct effects model, a terrible fit. The agency theory, the textbook answer, it did okay, a fair fit. But the rubber stamp model, it was a runaway winner, a CFI of 0.95. That is an excellent fit. Decades of conflicting research, when you put it all together, point to one very clear conclusion. So what does this rubber stamp model actually look like in the real world? What did the data show? Well, it turns out that management teams that have been around longer, that are larger and more diverse, tend to build larger boards of directors. And those larger boards, in turn, are associated with better company performance. The key insight here is that the management team is actively shaping the very board that's supposed to be overseeing them. That is the rubber stamp pathway, right there in the data.
Now look, this result about who runs the show in the boardroom is fascinating all on its own. But the bigger story, the real game changer here, goes way beyond this one corporate power struggle. It's about the tool itself. MASEM really represents a whole new way of doing science.
I mean, the authors of the study said it best themselves. They said that MASEM lets us reach a higher level of understanding by pitting the explanatory power of alternative theoretical models against one another. Think about that. Instead of just adding one more confusing study to the pile, we can now use the entire pile to test the big ideas against each other. It helps us move from just asking if 2 things are related to understanding how and why. And that just opens up a whole world of possibilities. You could apply this to economics, psychology, medicine, really any field that has decades of accumulated research. We can finally start settling some of these ancient debates with real data-driven answers. So it leaves you with a pretty exciting question, doesn't it? Now that we have a tool this powerful, what long-held belief should we put to the test next?